Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the Mobile Bev Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have a super juicy topic for you, the resistance to success. If you have wanted success in body, business, relationships, and you have just not been able to create it or sustain it, potentially you've been able to create it and then you crash it on some subconscious level, we are going to help you see all the ways that we have seen in all of our years of supporting coaching clients, people sabotaging their own success. And so a lot of this is going to be subconscious. Some of it might actually be conscious to you. We have a lot of self-aware players in the field right now, and you might be consciously aware of it. We are going to give you the medicine, which is a medicine that nobody likes to take. But at the end of this episode, we are going to give you the medicine of how to overcome a lot of these sticking points if you have a subconscious or conscious resistance to success.
This topic came up after I had a call with a one-on-one client that historically has had a very successful business. I'm talking $1 million business. And COVID happened, like things got a little sticky, a little tough. They made a couple what they would describe as bad decisions. And they just then started pulling back and becoming really risk adverse, even though they had proof in their field that they were capable of creating a business that achieved massive success. And so when I pushed a little bit as to the hesitancy, the unconscious resistance to actually doing the things that they knew was going to create momentum and success in the business, more and more kind of little things came out. And I started to hear things like, well, I love to lead, I hate to manage, or I'm not very good with money, or I need to get all my ducks in a row before I sell things because otherwise I don't know where the money is going. Just a bunch of little things that became, okay, now we're just putting roadblocks in our way for the sake of putting roadblocks in our way. And so again, I started to let's dig a little bit deeper. And the end result of that conversation really was that they don't trust themselves with money. So if they were to make a bunch of money, they would have to trust themselves with more money. And so that came out of it. Also, this I like to lead but not manage came down to I don't know how to manage. I'm not a strong manager, which to me is like I'm not a strong leader. It means that you don't like setting expectations, holding people accountable. And I've said these things in my early career too, where it's like I hire adults. And so I expect them to show up like adults. And so if I have to manage them, then that's really frustrating to me. And it takes me out of my creative process, right? And so the only way to become a better leader is to learn how to manage projects. You can't really manage people, but you can manage projects, which include people, right? And that means inspiring and motivating and making sure people have the tools and the expectations, the resources necessary to succeed. And so if you think of it that way, right, you're not really managing people, you're managing the situation. And so of course, I brought that to you and it became this whole like, yeah, we see this like this and we see this like that. And like, we also have this other client who is resistant to success, which comes up in this way. And so we thought it'd be just worthwhile having a conversation very openly about a lot of the things that we hear that seem like good reasons to people as to why they're not currently experiencing massive success. There's all these roadblocks, the economy, all these other things, right? Which become, in a lot of ways, scapegoats for us not leveling up, for us not developing the skills necessary to actually be able to hold success and the results of success, whether that looks like massive amounts of money or a big team that now needs to be managed. We see that a lot. Well, it's like if I grow too much, then I'm going to need more employees. And I actually don't know how to lead and manage employees. Or in another situation with this client, was that if I get all of this business and I make all of this money, now I need structure and infrastructure to support all of that business. And I'm not very operationally savvy. I don't even know how to juggle all the moving parts to a project that large. And so not consciously, but subconsciously, there was this resistance to booking more clients, to scenarios wherein more team would be needed, to raising their prices to a point where they're making money because now that means that I actually have more money to be responsible for, et cetera.
And how you do one thing is how you do all things. And so if you are seeing an inability to create success because you can't be trusted, you may also see an inability to create health because you can't be trusted. So I love to bake, okay? And I have this story, very conscious of this story, that if I bake, I gain weight. And those two things are not actually true because I, over the last year and a half, have realized I have autonomy. What? What? And so it's not true that because sugar is in my house, I am now a victim to sugar. I love to bake and I love to feed other people baked goods. I love to see them light up with joy. I can be trusted around baked goods. I am someone who can be trusted around junk food. I can be trusted. And so not being able to trust yourself, it's bleeding into everything. I've heard that like God made me funny because if he made me hot, I'd be a hoe, right? Like I can't be trusted with a hot body. I can't be trusted with sweets. I can't be trusted with a large team. I can't be trusted with money. This is playing out in so many ways. The medicine for this one, and actually I'll get to the medicine at the end, but the medicine for this particular one is to be someone that you can trust. And so that requires you looking with real eyes at situations and scenarios where you knew better, but you didn't do better, right? Where you knew not to spend money frivolously on this thing, or you knew that this food wasn't good for your body and your body wasn't asking for it, where you knew that this person didn't have your best interests at heart, red flags, and yet you dated them anyway, so on and so forth. Not feeling safe with massive amounts of cash, I think, is a appendage of the body of not being able to trust yourself, not feeling safe. For me, I experienced sexual abuse as a child. And so moving forward in my life, it was not safe for me to feel sensual or to be sensual, or certainly not to be perceived as sensual in my body. And so I would hold excess weight because I was afraid of being attractive, right? And being attractive happens in a number of ways. When I'm having a sales conversation with someone, I need to be attractive, not necessarily physically, but energetically. And I learned from a young age that it wasn't safe for me to be attractive in my energy or in my body. And so I would attempt unconsciously to cloak myself and keep myself from being perceived that way. Another one that we see is the unwillingness to sacrifice. And if you're not a practitioner of sacrificial magic, you should be because you're doing it anyway all day long. A lot of times when you look and say, this is what I want and I don't currently have it, a sacrifice is required. And unconsciously, you don't feel like the sacrifice is worth it. And so you're never actually going to achieve that thing. And you have one of two options there: put the desire down, or decide that you are going to sacrifice and then go make the sacrifice. Okay. If you are somebody who spends money frivolously today, then to become someone who has an excess of 100 grand in your bank account, you're going to have to sacrifice the version of you today that buys too many houseplants when you have enough houseplants. That's me.
You're talking to yourself here.
That's me. That's me. I love the houseplants, right? There are more serious examples I could give you of this, but anything that you're looking out and you're saying, I want to be there and I'm not there, it's going to require a sacrifice, a version of you, a habit that you have, your comfort, what you perceive to be your stability, so on and so forth.
That was beautiful. There's a few things as you were talking that came up for me when we talk about self-trust and the medicine there, being someone that you can trust. That's where the whole accountability comes in. And I'm sure we've done podcast after podcast about accountability because it was some shit I was on last year as we were working to optimize the accelerator program, which is an accountability framework for people who are doing the damn thing, but then are like, I just feel like I'm not as productive as I should be. I'm not making as much progress as I should be. I need somebody to be accountable to. I need some help and some support in getting this done. And that's not unusual because oftentimes when people become entrepreneurs, all of their prior accountability frameworks are left with their job. Even the most self-driven people may struggle to be self-trustworthy to the things that they said that they want when they're floating out in the ethers and nobody is telling them they should or need, or holding their hand saying like, but hey, this is the thing that you said was the most important to you. Because in the day to day of life, we have competing priorities. And so there's always something that is important to you sitting out in front of you. And so it's easy to forget, out of sight, out of mind, that, oh, yeah, that thing that I said was the most important to me, in this case, the example being starting a business that will help build this personal wealth. It feels nebulous. It feels impossible. It feels so far out there that, like, yeah, tomorrow I can get started. But today, these other desires are more imminent, right? And so the thing that I learned about kind of accountability and self-trust during that period of study, and I've said this a number of different times, but accountability is this opportunity for us to hand a piece of ourselves that we don't currently feel like we can be trusted with to someone else and say, hold this for me and help me learn to trust myself with this piece. That could be the example I gave last year was I hired a personal trainer, because if you just tell me to work out strength training, I'm probably not going to do it. But if you're there holding that for me, I'm going to do it. And the results are great. Now, some people like myself choose to always have someone hold that for me. And potentially someday I'll just do it by myself. I do with like running and like other things. But with strength training, I just like having someone to tell me what to do. But in other scenarios, it's like, well, I needed someone to teach me a framework from which I can succeed. And there are a number of different tools out there. So if you're like, I can't trust myself with social media, because if I sit down and I start scrolling, 3 hours later, I'm going to be like hating myself, self-loathing, right? Because I said I wasn't going to do that thing and then I got sucked in. Listen, it's designed to do that. So like you're fighting your own humanity there. So there are tools that you can utilize outside of yourself. You stick it in a lockbox. People say put it in a different room when you go to sleep so it's not the first thing that you reach for. So there are things outside of yourself that you can reach for to help build self-trust, right? Anyone who goes through any addiction support, the gamut there is to help you to build tools to not do the thing that you said that you didn't want to do. And oftentimes, if you take people out of those like addiction services, they start doing the thing again, right? Because they haven't actually truly built up the necessary skill sets or the necessary framework to do the thing that they want. And like, no shame on that. It's just the desire to do the thing is greater than the desire not to do the thing, right? So the big why always has to be drawn back to. And that's one of the reasons why within our accountability structures, I always ask people every day, remind yourself of your big why. Because if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And you're going to start doing things that are incongruous with the thing that you said that you wanted. And so with self-trust, recognize that is oftentimes not a solo venture. You want to be able to trust yourself to do certain things. Sometimes you need the support of others. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that, you're not capable of doing it. We're communal beings. You like to say should is just could with shame on it. And shame is an externalized force. And we love to poo-poo on shame because like, ew, gross. Nobody likes to feel that way. But it's also a very useful tool. We develop shame because it was a useful tool. It's part of humanity. And so if you want to utilize shame intentionally, make sure it's for your own good. Make sure it's for the things that you actually want. The second thing that I wanted to mention, which also brings us back to the bigger why, is the sacrifice. And we've talked about this again in the past, where everything that you choose to focus on, everything you choose to do, when you make that decision and you commit to it, you are also committing to sacrificing everything else for what it is that you're doing. So me talking to you and doing this podcast right now means I'm sacrificing everything else on my to-do list in order to do it. So we consider that a sacred commitment. I'm holding this podcast sacred because I'm sacrificing everything else. It's worth asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now worth sacrificing everything else because it is in alignment with my bigger why? Again, that comes back to like your bigger why. And what we find, or at least what I find when I work with clients, oftentimes they're spending a lot of time doing things. They're really super busy. And this actually comes into play when we did our time bending container. People are really busy doing a whole bunch of things in sacrifice of their bigger why. And so when we start peeling back those layers and we ask them questions about, okay, why do you do this? And what was the purpose of this? It's because they were sacrificing their own bigger why to please or appease somebody else, something else, some commitment they made outside of what their actual desires are. Because this is what success looks like based on what I was given by society, my dad, my mom, whatever that looks like. And they fill their entire lives up with things that exhaust them energetically because it actually has nothing to do with their bigger why. Sometimes it's even a business they chose to start. And when we ask them those questions, they don't even like the business. What they want is freedom. What they want is the ability to travel and take time off or spend more time with their family. And they created this business because they thought it would get them that. And so now they're hardcore committed to this business, only to find out it's not a big enough why. It's actually not fulfilling, potentially not even doing the thing that they wanted to do in the begin with, but they're just continuing on with the business because they have put in their mind that, like, I'm committed to this. I said I was going to do this. It's important for me to succeed here. And what they don't realize is that continuing to go down that road is a sacrifice of their actual why.
Sacrificial magic is either practiced consciously or unconsciously. Again, I want to reiterate, you're practicing it all the time. If you wake up and take a shower instead of having a cup of coffee, you had to sacrifice a cup of coffee. If you wake up and coffee instead of shower, you sacrifice the shower, now you stink. Do you know? And so you have to, like, it's happening all the time. People don't realize. They think I'm doing all the things. I'm busy, busy, busy. I'm doing all the things. And they don't realize that they're sacrificing their big why, or that they're sacrificing their big goal, potentially because they don't trust themselves to have more money, or to be energetically or physically attractive, or to be in a relationship that's harmonious. Oftentimes, if you were raised in a disharmonious environment, then you're perpetuating those patterns. People don't like to admit that they get really high off of confrontation. They get really high off of rage. They get really high off of dysfunction. And you would say, no, Dawn, nobody gets high off those things. All right, walk a mile in my shoes, coach a couple hundred people, and then come back to me, okay? Because yes, they absolutely do. And when you do the work, you'll find you do too. And so being in a harmonious relationship would cost you. You would have to sacrifice that delicious superiority complex you have when your hubby doesn't do the dishes or he doesn't do them to your standard. The sacrifice might be unconscious, that you don't realize I'm doing all this busy work so that I don't actually just have to do sales, which actually leads me to another point that I wanted to mention today. The stories that we're telling ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, we hear these all the time. Things like, it's too expensive to eat whole food. I'm not a morning person, and so you're not going to catch me at the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's a story you get to keep. I want to be clear. My lover gets up every morning, 4 a.m., before he goes and works a 10-hour shift in a very physically intensive job. He goes to the gym every morning. I love that for him. I love sleep more. Sleep is more sacred to me than working out. And so you'll catch me snoozing. All right. And so some of them you get to keep, but you have to be honest with yourself about the story. Start seeing them with real eyes. I'm just not good at sales. Sales feels slimy. I don't like marketing, or I don't understand marketing. I just can't lose weight, genetically this, or I'm a victim to sugar that, or whatever it is. We have these subconscious stories that, like, are informing what we sacrifice in a day. And as long as they remain unconscious, Carl Jung, the unconscious will rule you, and you will call it fate, right? And so we make the unconscious conscious, and then we can start making actual changes. One of the other things that I have here is the need to be loved, or the need to be liked. And so if you grew up in a family of overweight people who were very judgmental of people who had their shit together, people who got up in the morning and went for a jog, or people who spent a lot of money on healthy foods or whatever, then you're less likely to pursue that, because it would mean that you have to sacrifice the love and adoration of your family. These things are built in childhood. And so for me, people with money were seen as the enemy. When I was growing up in poverty, people with money were the reason that we were in poverty. Or people who had a lot of money were greedy. People who had a lot of money were self-centered. People who had a lot of money didn't care about other people, so on and so forth. And so growing up, I had to come to terms with at some point that if I was going to be successful, it meant I was going to become the object of my family's judgment, of my family's disappointment. Not to mention all the religious constraints around having money or being sexual or whatever it is. And so it's worth looking from a holistic point of view at the stories that you tell yourself about the goals that you want to achieve. That'll help you see why you're not achieving them.
That actually is where the Villain Era Challenge came in. We did that series of podcasts around the villain era, not so much in like go out and become the Joker and become just this absolutely terrible human, but that when you become what you are seeking to become, when no one around you is achieving those things, you feel like the villain and you got to lean in. It's like, yeah, I'm making a lot of money, right? In a family that doesn't make a whole lot of money. And so then you become the topic of kind of the backroom chatter. Oh, she thinks, and I've certainly in my journey seen this happen. I have a cousin who became a doctor. I do not come from a family of doctors, and then became an entrepreneur, then started getting featured in things like Forbes. And suddenly the conversation would be like, oh, they just think they're so good now. They're so much better than us. And because they go to these ritzy places and they travel to all of these places. And did you see the house that they're building? It has its own house. The house has a house. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you don't want that. You're the type that want to pull yourself up by the bootstraps because the American dream is that someday you're going to achieve those things. So out of one side of their mouth, they're like, man, that's what I want. And on the other side of their mouth, they're like, but how dare them? How dare they do that thing? And so they had to, at some point, realize that they were the villains in the family because they went and they achieved this level of success and they built this big fancy house. And sometimes when we would get together, because I'm not that judgmental, I too want to make a lot of money. They would tell me stories that would come across as, but like we drive a minivan. I don't know why the family, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about your minivan. Like you could drive a fucking Ferrari if you want to our family events. Lean in. Like you're making good money. Be proud of that. This is what you always wanted. Why give it all these caveats in that like, but like we host parties, we invite everyone else over to our house so that they can also enjoy our success. And comes to the point where like you have to really just own the villain. And that's what this whole episode is about, is this resistance to success. If you find that you reach a certain level of success, that you plateau, because the other side of that is terrifying. And you may not realize that that's why you're plateauing there. And we sometimes see this, right? So like people will come to us and they're like, I just, I haven't been able to grow my business in the past year and I'm not sure what I'm doing. And one of the first things that we look at is follow-up, because that's like low-hanging fruit. That's like easy money, right? And they're like, oh, I don't want to become annoying. Like I send 3 emails and we're like, send 12, just that little thing. Or cold outreach. Everyone hates cold outreach, but we're like, I promise you, like everything you want is on the other end of these things that you don't want to do because you're afraid of being annoying, you're afraid of being aggressive, you're afraid of being loud, you're afraid of being big. All of those things are what are keeping you from that next level of success. And you do have to lean into the villain a little bit there. You have to be like, okay, my success is worth being a little embarrassed, coming off as a little bit aggressive, being a little loud, all of these things that they said that you shouldn't do. That's what we find with our clients, is that they're capping their success because the things that would lead to that next level of success make them uncomfortable with how they want to be perceived by the world. Whether it's you're not very good with money, great, become great with money. Learn how to be better with money. It's not rocket science. It's actually just like pluses and minuses, costs and income. It's the simplest math you're going to find at the level that we're at, right? You want to talk about the shell game that looks like fucking corporate borrowing at the, with the oligarchs. Like that's not even real math. It's fake math they all agreed upon. And so like, if you don't understand that, that's okay. But the math that we see people struggle with is pluses and minuses, added and subtraction, a little bit of division here, there, and everywhere, but not complicated math. Leadership, that's a skill that can be developed. You're not a born leader. Some people might be born into families that practice leadership skills as a part of their everyday life. And so it looks very natural to them, but it wouldn't have been had they been born into a family that didn't have good leadership skills, right? It was taught to them over time. Leadership can be learned and is learned. It can be practiced. Management, same thing. It's a skill set, right? So all of these things that people tell themselves, I'm not a good leader. I'm not good with money. I can't project manage. I wouldn't even know what to do if I had 4 events in a single day. We see that sometimes. We're like, well, I max my books out at 2 events a day. Why? Well, the answer is because I'm terrified of having to level up and do 4 a day. Like I just currently, my anxiety would be too high. My systems wouldn't be able to handle it. Okay, that's a choice you're making. You're choosing to keep yourself small there. There's no mobile bar out there that has any reason to cap themselves like to any number of events per day if the demand says you can accommodate more than this, great. Then just build the systems, buy the equipment, hire the people, train the people, create the expectations, build the systems to ensure that there's success, and then you can do as many events as you want on a given day. But that process of getting from here to there is terrifying for people. So they're resistant to the success because they're resistant to the change that would need to happen, the effort that would need to be put in to make that possible.
I'm a living testament. People think that I'm such a great leader. Listen, go ask my first team. They were there for that process. And it took a lot of them going, you're actually an asshole for me to be like, maybe I'm the problem. And
Yeah, I
develop
got
leadership
bitch.
skills.
Oh, she's such a bitch. And
Yeah.
I had to sit with the fact, well, maybe I was. Because
Yeah.
here's what and I think you'll find that you did the same thing. The only tool I had in my tool belt was authority. And so I used it, not leadership. I didn't have any. So I used authority. And that did make me a bit of a bitch.
Yeah, it's true. And it got things done, like the lack of retention. All right. So the next thing that I want to talk about here is being afraid of your own power, being afraid of who you'll have to become in order to get where you want to go. And a lot of people are terrified of the evolution process. Your nervous system is wired to keep you the way that you are, but your nervous system is also able to learn throughout your entire life. You can reprogram, you can hack your nervous system at any point in your life, which is also a skill set. Hacking your nervous system to hold more attention, to hold more wealth, to hold more activity. All of those things can be learned, but the resistance that you have sometimes is in the body. Sometimes the body won't feel safe holding that amount of money, holding that amount of responsibility, or holding that amount of power, right? When you start having difficult conversations with your family, that's a sacrifice toward who you want to become. And your nervous system will tell you at every step of the way, I'm not safe. And so having the tools to hack your nervous system will help you immensely, because who you have to become in order to achieve the things that you want to achieve will be a different version of you than the person you are right now. And so, guys, I told you I was going to give you the ultimate medicine at the end of this, and hopefully you've picked up on little nuggets of medicine throughout. But the ultimate medicine is action. It is always going to be action. Action and reflection are far greater tools than projection and inaction. Okay. And so I want you to be taking massive action, sit with how terrifying that feels, take responsibility for how it feels. And what you're doing there is you're exercising your risk tolerance. You're also teaching your nervous system at every new level that we are still safe. Look, I made $100,000. I'm still safe. Look, I had a difficult conversation with my grandma. I'm still safe. Look, I lost 30 pounds and now I'm very attractive and we're still safe. Whatever it is, we want you taking massive action and then reflecting on the fear that came up, not projecting fear into the future that keeps you from actually taking any action. That's how you stagnate. It's how you self-sabotage. The new you, ultimate sacrifice, requires the old you. All right. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the podcast today. I hope this was immensely valuable for you. Lord knows it's been immensely valuable for us to learn this in all of our years. And we look forward to hanging out with you guys on the next one.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram at mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.